Welcome back to Ijimi Media, your source for weekly news and some of the most important stories from Africa and the diaspora. We begin in South Africa, where anti-immigrant protests across the country have turned violent. In the Western Cape, demonstrations over the perceived rise in undocumented immigration escalated quickly. In the coastal city of Mosul Bay, what started as a planned peaceful protest turned into chaos. Groups of protesters stormed the informal settlement of Asla Park, which is home to many immigrants from Malawi and Mozambique. At least 55 homes were burned, forcing families to flee. South African police confirmed that 2 people were found dead, though they haven't officially linked the deaths to the violence. However, the Mozambican government says that at least 5 of its citizens have died in these attacks. And this isn't isolated. In other parts of the Western Cape, immigrants report that armed groups have gone door to door, threatening them to leave. Around 300 people have already fled across the border, while others have taken shelter in forests and common areas. Some groups have even issued a June 30th deadline for immigrants to leave the country. And unfortunately, this isn't new. South Africa has struggled for a long time with xenophobic violence. Economic hardship, high unemployment, and competition over jobs and services have fueled resentment towards immigrants. Resentment that often turns to violence. In response, countries like Ghana and Nigeria have begun organizing evacuation flights for their citizens. But this raises deeper questions. For many, this violence contradicts the spirit of Pan-African unity, the same unity that once rallied the continent against apartheid. Instead of cooperation, we're seeing division in South Africa. And political leadership is also a major issue here. So far, there's been limited criticism of these protests and violence from those in power. In fact, it probably helps many in power to blame problems on immigrants rather than on poor governance. The reality is, immigrants are often blamed for deeper economic issues they didn't create. The real question is whether South Africa can move beyond scapegoating and address the root causes of its challenges. As we move forward, we all need to watch this carefully. Africa as a continent is too vulnerable to fight internally. We all need to cooperate rather than embrace hostility and distrust. We'll stop here for now, but we'll continue to watch this story and keep you all updated on what's going on. Next, we turn to the United States, where Black communities continue to fight for their own rights. In late April, the Supreme Court issued a ruling that weakened protections under the Voting Rights Act, making it harder to require the creation of majority Black congressional districts. To understand why this matters, it helps to know how congressional districts work. The country is divided into districts, of course, and each district elects one representative to Congress. These representatives are chosen by a majority vote within their district. The boundaries of these areas are drawn by state governments, a process known as redistricting. Because voting is based on majority rule within each district, the way its lines are drawn can significantly affect who gets elected. If a minority group is spread out across many districts, their voting power can be diluted or weakened. They may not form a majority anywhere, even if they make up a large portion of the overall population. Majority Black districts were created to address this issue. By ensuring that Black voters make up a majority in certain districts, these maps make it more likely that Black communities can elect candidates who represent their interests. Without such districts, their political influence can be weakened through boundaries that divide their votes. As legal protections for these districts are weakened, the effects on representation and political power are beginning to emerge. And now we're starting to see the impact. On June 2nd, the court allowed the state of Alabama to use a congressional map that removes one of its 2 majority Black districts. This case goes back to 2023, when Alabama introduced a new map that reduced majority Black districts from 2 to 1, even though Black residents make up about 27% of the state's population. More than 1 in 4 people in the state are Black. At the time, lower courts ruled the map was discriminatory and said Alabama needed at least 2 majority Black districts to ensure fair representation. But after recent changes in how voting rights laws are interpreted, the case returned to the courts. Once again, lower courts said there was clear evidence of racial discrimination. This time, however, the Supreme Court ruled differently, allowing the map to stand. What this means in practice is that Black voters in Alabama will likely have less influence in electing representatives of their choice. And it raises a broader issue. While legal segregation is gone, the struggle for equal political representation continues. Voting isn't just about casting a ballot. It's about whether your vote actually can lead to meaningful change. When district lines are redrawn in ways that dilute or weaken certain communities, it can limit their ability to advocate for resources, policies, and real change. This is an ongoing story, and one that will continue to shape political representation across the country. So stay tuned, keep coming back, and we'll keep you updated on this. Finally, we want to end on a more hopeful note. This week, African leaders gathered in Seoul, South Korea for the 2026 Korea-Africa Foreign Ministers meeting. One of the key developments came from Ghana. South Korea announced plans to partner with Ghana on major projects, including the opening of a new university and the building of a Hyundai manufacturing plant in the country. The two nations also agreed to expand cooperation in areas like artificial intelligence, energy, and critical minerals. There are even discussions about easing travel restrictions, starting with visa waivers for certain passport holders, and potentially expanding to the whole nation. For Ghana, this could be a big step towards job creation and industrial growth, but there are still questions. So far, there isn't any clear timelines for these projects. This means it's uncertain when or even if these plans will be implemented. There are also concerns about the quality of jobs that could be created. In other countries, similar projects have brought employment, but often with low wages and limited long-term benefits for workers. And we can't forget the fact that Hyundai is not a local company. It's great that it's bringing jobs, but the goal should be for indigenous businesses to learn and develop their own industries. So while the announcement is promising, the real impact will depend on how it's implemented. For now, it's a moment mixed with optimism, but also a little bit of caution. That's it for this week. Tune in next time as we continue bringing you stories from across Africa and the diaspora. If there's a topic you want us to cover, let us know in the comments. Our goal is simple: to make information about our communities accessible and meaningful for everyone. So if you want to support, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next week.